I forgot my driver's license, and I cannot go to work or leave the house and be on the street without my ID. Because if the police stop me and ask me questions and I don't have my ID, you'll have to come and pick me up from jail. Now, I knew as a parent that he had been harassed regularly by the police because I heard him and his friends come home and talk about it and complain about it. But I had no idea that it happened to the level of frequency that for him, walking around with his picture ID was something that he felt that he had to do. The way people don't leave home without your American Express card, he would not leave home without his ID. And it hit me because I was like, wow, this is like South Africa used to be, where black people could not walk around on the streets without having ID, without being subject to arrest. And that really scared me because I'm a lawyer. You know, I became a lawyer because I believe in the Constitution, I believe in laws, I believe in civil society, and I believe that, you know, by working within the system, you could make a difference. And yet, I saw, as evidenced in the comments of my own child, how little the work that I've done, the work that people before me did, have made a difference in the lives of young black men today. So, to go back to where I started, I want to say that of the arrests that we talked about for marijuana in New York City, 85% of those were of black and Latinos. 85% of 43,000 people. And the reason that I think that that's important is because it means that the experiences that you heard Lauren talk about that were happening to these young white teenagers is the occasional experience of a young white teenager, but it's the regular experience of a young black or Latino teenager living in New York. I, as a parent, you know, made a decision that my principal goal was to keep my son out of jail. That has been a goal of mine from the time he hit 13. I sent him away for several years to live with his father because I felt that would help keep him out of jail. I have picked every job that he's had in the last 5 or 6 years because I felt that was a way to keep him out of jail. And I allow him and his friends, if they want to smoke marijuana in our house because I want to keep him out of jail. And I think it's important for organizations like this one that are committed to reforming the laws about marijuana to realize that the reality for African Americans around marijuana is different, and that as pernicious as our system is, that all of this is part of a bigger picture that's really designed to funnel people into the criminal justice system. You know, the reason that the city is prosecuting so many young people for marijuana isn't only because they want to hassle them and because they're doing the quality of life thing. It's also because that's their first way of getting them fingerprinted, of getting their mug shots, of getting them into the criminal justice system. You know, it is not accidental. These things all feed in. It's not by happenstance that we end up with a situation that 1 in 3, 1 in 4 young black men is under some form of criminal justice supervision. It starts with something small. It starts with being stopped and frisked on the street and having the cop find a half of a blunt, a $5 bag of weed in your pocket. They take you down, they book you, they got your fingerprints, they're waiting now for some other charge. When I worked several years ago at the Civil Liberties Union, one of the policies that the NYPD tried to sneak into the school system was to start requesting that school administrators give them copies of the school yearbooks so that they could keep them at the police station and use them so that when victims of crimes came in and were looking for perpetrators and they described the perp as a young black male, that they could whip out the school books from the neighboring high schools and have them look. Now, there was no reason to believe that the majority of these kids had been involved in any criminal activity at all, but, you know, under the theory that you're suspect until proven innocent, it was considered to be reasonable request to make of school authorities. Luckily, the Civil Liberties Union and other parents shed some light on this, and there was enough uproar about it, not so much by minority parents who were used to having their kids treated like criminals, but the parents on the Upper West Side who didn't want their kids' school books to be hauled into the police department, that the NYPD said, no, we're not going to do this. But I think that we're reaching a relatively dangerous place in this country in terms of maintaining democracy, to the extent that we're willing to continue to sacrifice civil liberties of the majority of Americans in order to subjugate a proportion of the population. We're never really going to be able to be a truly democratic society. And I say that one of the pernicious things about slavery, about segregation, about drug prohibition is that it harms everyone. Not just the person who's criminalized, not just the person who's prosecuted, but the people whose own rights are compromised in the effort that is made in order to target those people. So when the woman who, I don't know your name, but the mother who spoke about facing charges by the police because of the fact that young people were smoking in her house, what I say to you is that that situation is part of a much larger context in which our society is using law enforcement as a way to hold down groups of people. And it's never going to be able to address the problems that you talked about in terms of a law case or whatever until you begin to deal with the bigger context, the bigger system in which these things are taking place. Right now, drug prohibition has become the principal vehicle for continuing to maintain racial domination in America. And unless you understand that, you will not understand what it will take to bring it down. And so I challenge all of you, to continue doing the work that you're doing, and when you talk to people, to have them understand that these things are happening inside of a bigger context, that the fight that you're fighting around marijuana is a bigger fight against drug prohibition in general, and an even bigger fight against subjugation of people, against marginalizing people, of continuing a process of discrimination, be it based on race, sex, gender, or the substances that people consume. Thank you. Sit down. I apologize. No one ever asked me to chair a panel before, so I forgot that there's responsibilities that so forgive me. So let me introduce the next speaker. See, this is a really beautiful black man. It's very good for us that he isn't one of those statistics of people who's under criminal justice supervision, because otherwise he might not be able to be here with us today. His name is Clifford Thornton. He's from the great state of Connecticut, and I say the great state because Connecticut has been very progressive in terms of the approach that they've been taking to drug policy, and actually, along with San Francisco and Seattle and a few other places, sort of represents a beacon of light in terms of the direction that we ought to be going in. And it's because of the work of people like Cliff, who goes around speaking to large groups of people about the evils of drug prohibition, that the atmosphere in Connecticut is a lot more conducive to reform. So I'd like to hand it off to Cliff Thornton from Efficacy.
I might have to add that that's been quite an introduction. Most of the time they're throwing tomatoes at me. I'm going to pretty much piggyback on what Deborah has been saying, because what she has said is pretty much sums it up, and hopefully I can just put the nail in the coffin, so to speak. My organization, Efficacy, is not just a drug policy reform organization. It is an organization dedicated to finding peaceful ways to respond to social problems. We believe that a peaceful and effective drug policy depends on removing criminality and developing a policy of regulation and control. In other words, We believe we should legalize drugs as the first step to building a peaceful society.